The image of the nun, popularized by cinema, did not emerge from nowhere. Behind the makeup and terror on screen lies a darker origin, recorded in forgotten convents and hushed accounts by the church itself. This story is not about faith or sin alone, but about something that defies human understanding, a presence that should never have been awakened. It all began in the 17th century in an isolated abbey in Eastern Europe. The nuns living there reported strange phenomena, whispers during prayers, footsteps in empty corridors, and the constant feeling of being watched from the shadows. Little by little, the peace of the convent was swallowed by fear and the heavy silence of frozen nights. Among the novices was Helena, a young woman of unshakable faith who sought redemption for her soul. In her first days, she appeared devout and disciplined, but soon began to have disturbing visions. She spoke of figures covered in dark veils, faces without features, and eyes glowing in the dark like burning embers. At first, she believed it was only a spiritual test, but the visions grew stronger. Some nights, the nuns awoke to hear Helena praying in unknown tongues, even while she was sound asleep. It was as if her mouth were being used by another force, mocking faith by twisting sacred words into grotesque and unsettling sounds. Alarmed, the sisters summoned an exorcist priest. During the rituals, Helena described intimate details of those present, secrets she could never have known. Her eyes darkened into bottomless pits, devoid of reflection. To the clergy, this was no ordinary possession, but the manifestation of something older, relentless, and far more dangerous. Investigations revealed the convent had been built upon pagan ruins. Centuries earlier, human sacrifices had been carried out on that very soil. The church had believed it had purified the site, but instead, it had sealed away forces that should never have been disturbed. Helena, pure and vulnerable, became the perfect vessel. One winter night, every candle in the convent extinguished at once. A suffocating chill spread through the halls. The nuns ran to the chapel and found Helena kneeling at the altar. Her lips were sewn shut by invisible forces, yet she was still murmuring words no human ear had ever understood. The priest tried to finish the exorcism, but with each prayer, Helena smiled mockingly, as though the entity were ridiculing the scriptures. Days later, she was found dead, but her body remained intact, untouched by decay. The convent was hastily closed, and all records of the tragedy were buried by the church. But the accounts did not end there. Decades later, nuns in other convents reported seeing a woman in black habit with a disfigured face and burning eyes. She appeared during Mass, knelt in empty pews, and vanished like smoke. The church gave the apparition a name whispered only in secret, the Dark Nun. In the Vatican's secret archives, this phenomenon received an official title, the Manifestation of the Dark Nun. Documents described her as a parody of faith, an entity that dons the habit only to mock the sacred. She presents herself as a servant of God, but in truth she twists devotion into blasphemy and spreads terror wherever she appears. Over time, the account spread across Europe. Missionaries claimed that the Dark Nun appeared in newly built convents as if seeking places of faith to corrupt. She never attacked immediately. She lingered in silence, watching, waiting for the right moment to infiltrate the most fragile soul and turn it into her puppet. Witnesses always described the same detail: the eyes. They were not human but deep, hypnotic, capable of paralyzing even the most devout. Many said that merely locking eyes with her for a few seconds was enough to make their faith falter. Hearts raced, breath vanished, and an inexplicable terror consumed their minds. In a French convent, a nun named Marguerite claimed she heard laughter during confession. When she turned, no one was there. Days later, she mysteriously vanished. Only her folded habit remained on the altar. It was believed the entity had taken her form to deceive the others, blurring the line between flesh and shadow. The church tried to silence these stories, fearing mass panic among the faithful. Yet exorcist priests were sent in secret, and many never returned. Those who did survive described the same thing, an intense spiritual battle where prayers weakened and sacred symbols shattered on their own in the presence of the dark nun. Some scholars suggested the entity was no ordinary demon, but something older, predating Christianity itself. A pagan force bound by faith, which adopted the form of a nun as the perfect disguise. Camouflaged among the devout, she spread fear while hiding in plain sight, her veil serving both as mask and mockery. The 19th century brought new reports. Travelers claimed to see women in black habits walking along deserted roads at night. They never spoke or asked for help. They only stared at passers-by until horses reared in terror, and when people looked back, the figure had vanished, leaving behind only the biting chill of midnight air. In an Italian village, children swore they saw the nun inside their homes. She never spoke, only placed icy hands upon their shoulders, leaving dark marks that never faded. Many believed those touches were invitations, seals marking their souls for eventual claim. It was not an attack, but a signature of ownership. The Vatican compiled secret dossiers spanning hundreds of pages on the phenomenon. They recorded the apparition's evolution, her growing intelligence, and her skill at manipulating human emotions. She was called the parasite of faith, feeding not on flesh, but on the fear of the devout and the vulnerability of the penitent. Records revealed that at times the entity mimicked voices. Priests reported hearing confessions in empty cells. Others heard their own names whispered in the dark. The most unsettling detail: she could speak in ancient tongues long dead, as though she had walked the earth centuries before Christianity even existed. Despite countless efforts, there was never a definitive way to contain her. Exorcisms only weakened her temporarily. The cross seemed to provoke her, not repel her. Over time, scholars noticed her true power lay in memory. The more she was spoken of, the stronger she became, feeding endlessly on her own legend. In 1903, the diary of a Polish novice described 3 sleepless nights. She heard rhythmic knocks on the wood, like a hidden heart inside the walls. When she opened her cell door, the corridor was empty, except for thin finger marks pressed into melted wax. She swore she saw a black veil sliding along the floor. The bell rang 13 times on its own. The next morning, the diary page was found charred. At the start of the 20th century, photographers documented celebrations in convents. In several plates, a shadowy nun appeared at the edge of the frame, blurred, staring straight at the camera. The disturbing detail: her eyes looked directly at the viewer, while her face pointed elsewhere. Some negatives vanished, others burned during processing. Dark rooms reeked of incense and damp salt whenever her image appeared. During the war, monasteries used as hospitals reported more aggressive phenomena. Wounded soldiers awoke scratched, with phrases in archaic Latin carved into their skin. Nurses felt icy rosaries brush their necks and heard footsteps behind them. When they turned, a dark habit vanished into corners, leaving only a chant not found in Christian liturgy. A chaplain claimed words formed in the window's condensation: "Silence heals." A sealed letter from 1947 described the entity's inverted vows. Instead of poverty, abundance of fear. Instead of obedience, guilty silence. Instead of chastity, spiritual seduction. The writer warned that where guilt outweighed faith, she multiplied. Post-war Europe, drenched in grief, became her most fertile ground. The wax seal bore a faceless imprint, and witnesses said they heard footsteps as the letter was locked away. Secular researchers suggested the dark nun acts like a warped mirror, reflecting whatever each person fears confessing. For some, she appeared as temptation, for others, as judgment. This adaptive power explained why fixed rituals failed. The struggle was never against a single form, but a chorus of masks feeding on hidden memories. The conclusion, only complete confession, weakens her veil. In the 1960s, a psychologist interviewed ex-nuns who had abandoned their cloisters. 3 recounted the same dream, a hallway ending at a door with no handle, behind which someone prayed backward. Upon waking, their pillows were damp, as if soaked with ancient tears. One died weeks later, repeating the inverted prayer. Doctors called it trauma, yet all bore identical scars behind the ear. Old recordings captured whispers that didn't belong to the interviewees. Technicians isolated frequencies and discovered layered voices, including a deep male tone reciting baptismal names. Played backward, the audio revealed a litany asking for doors to be opened and promises to be broken. The study was archived, but cassette copies circulated, bringing nightmares of wet corridors and inverted candles. One exorcist noted the entity laughed whenever someone tried to name her. He realized she disliked being defined. The more they labeled her, the more elusive she became. She rarely fought for altars. Instead, she hid in sacristies and cracks. Her method was devastating: sow doubt, amplify guilt, corrode courage. He forced victims to name their fears aloud, and the laughter stopped. Only the metallic scent of blood lingered. With the arrival of television, apparitions appeared in live broadcasts of masses. Shadows crossed the background, and microphones caught breathing from nowhere. One transmission cut out when the priest spoke of spiritual battles. When the feed returned, a veiled figure briefly replaced him at the altar. Engineers blamed technical issues, but an elderly nun swore the fabric was from her demolished convent. Some believe the dark nun seeks not destruction, but permanence. She nests in traditions, hides in archives, and lingers in footnotes. She survives more in memory than in attack. Forgetting is her greatest threat. Paranormal investigators noted that ignoring her silenced the activity for years, until someone told the story again. Every retelling becomes a rope and a bell. The more it's pulled, the louder it rings. In the 1970s, investigations in Germany documented a young novice who screamed ancient words through the night. Recorders captured multiple voices, as if a choir joined her. The most disturbing detail, among the screams, phrases of nuns dead for centuries could be heard. This reinforced the idea that the entity did not merely imitate, but absorbed memories, drinking directly from the history of faith itself. In Italy, monks reported apparitions within ancient catacombs. They described shadowy figures in dark habits moving through damp walls, their footsteps echoing without bodies. When they tried to follow, torches went out, and the temperature dropped sharply. After minutes of terror, flames reignited, and on the ground lay a shattered rosary, an omen that faith had been corrupted within that sacred labyrinth. Around the same time, French investigators uncovered hidden manuscripts describing what they called the inverted oath. The dark nun demanded silence before truth, obedience to fear, and chastity twisted into eternal loneliness. It was a reversal of the sacred. For each vow sworn to God, she offered the parody, using the nun's habit as a disguise to mock what should have been protected. Photographs taken in abandoned convents revealed unsettling details. In some, a veiled figure appeared partially reflected in cracked mirrors, though absent from the room itself. It was as if her form existed only through reflection, a parallel world where faith became distorted. Enlarged images showed eyes without pupils, glowing like extinguished candles. Many photographers refused to continue their work after seeing the results. By the 1980s, exorcists reported recurring failures in their rituals. Sacred symbols split, crucifixes twisted, and Bibles vanished without explanation. One priest admitted the entity seemed to feed on expulsion attempts, growing stronger with each prayer. Scholars concluded that merely naming her aloud empowered her, her very essence made of memory and repetition. The more she was mentioned, the deeper her roots sank. Eyewitnesses claimed that when the dark nun appeared, time itself slowed. Candles burned more slowly, clocks stopped, and even breathing grew heavy. One account described her at the end of a corridor. Each step toward her stretched into minutes. Fear elongated reality, as if space and time themselves were toys in the hands of the entity, bending human perception to her will. Secret files suggested the entity manipulates human senses. Often, she did not show her full form, but announced herself through incense burned to ash, prayers played backward, or sudden drops in temperature. These signals preceded her complete manifestation. It was as if she first probed the victim's fear, testing boundaries before revealing herself. Never did she appear without first marking her territory. In England, an abandoned convent was studied by paranormal researchers. Equipment recorded sharp drops in energy and interference in radios. Amid the static, a female voice repeated, "Faith is silence." When slowed down, the phrase unraveled into multiple overlapping voices, a chant with no beginning and no end. It was not a statement, it was a living litany feeding on itself. The 1990s brought even more disturbing accounts, sightings beyond convent walls. Travelers claimed to see a nun in black habit standing motionless on deserted roads. When approached, she vanished. But hours later, the same travelers heard knocks at their doors and saw a shadowed veil cast across their windows. Escape was an illusion. She followed wherever they went. With advancing technology, video evidence emerged. Security cameras in churches captured figures crossing altars at night. In one recording, a veiled shape stood before a crucifix, motionless for hours. Reviewing the tape revealed clock hands spinning rapidly, while the nun remained still, untouched by time. She was not bound to human laws. She was an echo defying reality itself. In the early 2000s, modern reports appeared on internet forums. People from different countries described the same nightmare, a motionless nun in a black veil standing in the corner of their rooms. She did not move, only watched. Upon waking, wall scratches appeared like long fingers dragged across the surface. The chilling detail all claimed the same hour, exactly 3:15 in the morning. Digital investigations uncovered something disturbing. Corrupted computer files containing distorted black and white images of a nun. The faces were blurred, but the eyes were sharp, staring at the viewer. Technicians reported that after deleting the files, knocks came at their doors and footsteps echoed in empty halls. The entity seemed to adapt, spreading through technology, infecting the electronic world as well. The Vatican, pressured by these cases, reopened its oldest dossiers. Within them lay a terrifying conclusion. The entity could not be destroyed, only temporarily contained. She was described as a parody of faith, a mirror image twisted into blasphemy. The more generations learned of her story, the stronger she became, feeding endlessly on memory, fear, and whispered curiosity. Recent accounts suggest a sinister pattern. The dark nun never appears just once. After the first encounter, her presence returns at irregular intervals. At first, small signs, a sudden chill, extinguished candles, fleeting shadows. Then, the full apparition. It is believed she marks her victims, visiting them throughout their lives, waiting until their faith is at its weakest. Paranormal experts say her face is never the same. Some witnesses describe a blank void beneath the veil, others see eyes without lids, while some report rows of jagged teeth. In rare cases, she appeared angelic. The most accepted explanation, she adapts to each person's fear, shaping her appearance to slowly corrode the mind, turning terror into her strongest weapon. Thermal cameras revealed something chilling. The entity has no heat, but drains warmth from her surroundings. Areas where she appeared showed sudden drops in temperature, as if all energy was consumed by her presence. The cold was so severe that metal objects frosted over, even indoors. Breathing became nearly impossible, as though the air itself were collapsing into her body. Scholars proposed a darker theory. The nun does not feed solely on fear, but on interrupted faith. Each broken prayer, each unanswered doubt strengthens her. This explains why she haunts convents and churches, where devotion often wrestles with guilt. The oppressive silence she leaves behind is more than fear. It is the echo of drained souls, stripped of certainty. Over time, she became a hidden symbol, whispered in nightmares and woven into legends across cultures. Some believe she has no true form, wearing the nun's habit only because it unsettles the faithful most easily. Others argue she has existed since long before Christianity, adopting disguises throughout history, an eternal chameleon of darkness. The most terrifying belief is that there is no escape. Those who tried to flee, changing cities or countries, still experienced her signs. This fueled the idea that she is not bound to places, but to people. Once marked, a soul cannot turn back. The hunt becomes part of their existence, lingering until their final breath, when she comes to claim them fully. And so we reach the most haunting truth. The story of the nun is not just legend or Hollywood invention. She is a persistent echo, a presence that survives through memory and fear. As long as her name is spoken, as long as her image is remembered, she will never vanish. Perhaps even now she waits silently, standing just behind you.